That is the conclusion to Palantir Q3 2025. You had a lot of energy coming in from the entire team, especially with Dr. Karp, and he obviously had a message to get across, and I think he got it across. Let's start with you, Amir. Your thoughts on the call?
So someone wrote in the chat like during. I think everyone noticed this as well, but someone wrote. I counted exactly 114 table banks throughout, his opening speech. He was sitting and banging the heck out of that table. No, well, we kind of predicted that nice question, another bootcamp conversion one, wasn't really answered. Not too important. I think the two biggest ones was, of course, to see, okay, what is happening with AI FDs. I mean, it's been a topic for a while. There have been some demos out into the public, some kind of, there have been some whisperings, but they actually started to give us some kind of numbers like associated with it, which is what I love. I always say this, that people don't always understand, where Palantir is implemented. They don't always understand the use cases at a specific company, but everyone understands time. When they say that, spawning an army to, of AI FDs to transform a legacy data warehouse in 5 days that would have taken 2 years, like everyone can understand that. 2 years to 5 days, that is pretty significant. And then also, the AI HiveMind, the new capability there, great. Overall, the quarter, really, the business accelerated on throughout every single segment, like everything accelerated, even the weak ones, as you mentioned, like Europe was carried by Southeast Asia, and Korea and those markets. I also want to highlight the last question there. It just made me picture Brent Thiel, just the interview we watched with the Jefferies analyst just before, when he said, turn on conventional TV and watch those who didn't invest into us cry. And then, if you guys remember Brent Thiel's face, he kind of looked like he was about to cry. Like he looked pretty pissed off, just sitting there on CNBC. It was magical. But I let someone else give their initial thoughts before we dive into deeper.
Arnie, go ahead. Your thoughts?
The thing that intrigued me the most is seeing the evolution of FDs, the AI FDs that now empower, from what we understand, the FD themselves and then the clients. That is what really talks the language of shrinking time, to the point where I was really wondering the other day, imagine you are Palantir, you are called by a client, how you can really show what you can do, what you can tackle in very fast. And essentially, they described that with this new product, AI HiveMind, which is an aggregator of AIFDs or similar agents to tackle problems. I would be very curious to learn more about this, but seems so powerful if it is real that you can bring 2 years of work of a highly skilled FD in 2 days. It means that you can have almost 100x the interactions with your customers. So that to me seems the strongest hint of the entire call, because it's one of those stuff that really affect the numbers of the company. We were saying before, if you look at it from the eyes of normal company, when you see numbers like this, you can start rationally thinking, oh, this is probably a peak, then stuff will normalize. But if you start including these considerations of what is AIFD, and then the management says, look, the way we are accelerating while also getting a lot of margin is thanks to AIFD. And then we are seeing an evolution of AIFDs thanks to this new product. These are the stuff that make me think, okay, we are at a peak in terms of numbers. The peak is not the official peak. Like there is enough substance for all this trend to keep rolling. Maybe it will not be always a 60% growth or so on, but certainly it will be very, very strong. And if you can grow this strong while also having these margins, you always have ground for the valuation.
Okay. Matt, your thoughts on the call?
Well, I think it was a phenomenal call. I mean, who would have expected back in 2020, 2021 that we'd be actually thinking that we'd get to 4.5 billion or so in revenue in 2025? I mean, that's just we're literally within an arm's reach away, and yet here we are. I think everybody back then was laughing, and I think it just goes to show that really Carp is excited, and I think that there's even still more things to kind of come with respect to a lot of contracts that are being worked on. Sham obviously is out running about, doing all the conferences, going to the White House even. I think we've seen him, making all these deals with a lot of these other companies, obviously showing up and saying they're going to pledge, $50-100 billion deals to the White House. And Sham's sitting right there. Obviously, there's a plan in the background that we're obviously not privy to, that I think is yet to truly come through. And I think a lot of that has to do with maybe what happened with NVIDIA. You're starting to see that partnership come through. Maybe the Golden Dome stuff is going to come through. I still think there's just a lot of things with respect to opportunities that Palantir has to enter. And like you stated earlier, I mean, we're only at 911 total customers out of thousands upon thousands that can really benefit. And I'm starting to see others really start to stall out, like Databricks is really starting to stall out, and several others. Snowflake, obviously, you showed a great graphic with respect to revenue growth for them earlier. So I think people are really starting to recognize that what people said was a great technology and great software or great service that people were really hoping to really revolutionize their business isn't showing up as once expected, and is likely just throwing good money after bad. But you get good results with Palantir software, and I don't think that we've fully seen. They stated something huge in there with respect to AI FDE not necessarily being fully rolled out as of yet, and some other key products that I don't think are fully rolled out as of yet, but are probably in the trial mode. I'm very curious to see when those are officially rolled out and actually start to drive the bottom line, what we can expect in terms of continued customer count growth. And it might not necessarily mean that, revenue growth continues in the 60, 70, 80%, but you don't need much. I mean, all you need is continued revenue growth from a net dollar retention perspective, and that kind of provides a good floor for what your year-over-year revenue growth would be. So I'm very curious to see what ends up happening, and it's going to be interesting.
I also think there were some interesting comments regarding like the current customers. So they mentioned that the top 20 customers, I did the calculations, still 20 out of 911 customers account for 43% of revenues, and they are accelerating like how much they're growing. The top 20 customers account for almost half the business, and they are now growing 38% year over year, which is higher than the net dollar retention. So the most sticky, revenue, highest value clients are growing higher than the overall net dollar retention. And then the question came up in the call, like, well, how are you able to scale like this? And there was I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, we own part of the AI market that cares about value creation.
Yeah.
Because there is so much hyper focus on who can build out the most CapEx, who can, buy the most GPUs, who can, build the next LLM. But he put it like, yeah, no, we own the whole part of the AI market that cares about value creation. And that is like really powerful, because he also mentioned we create the value and then we get paid a portion of that, which is like how I always envision in my head, like, well, how can Palantir grow to like $1 trillion, $2 trillion market cap? Well, when you are able to sell your product for basically any price, as long as you're providing value like that is in aggregate of that. So let's say that you create $100 billion of value for a business. It is not like too weird to charge over $1 billion from that customer annually, like just some bogus numbers to put an example. If you can create more value, you can charge them more. Like, it's not a fixed price. So I think that dynamic is really, really powerful for Palantir. And he also mentioned that, like, yeah, we're kind of known now when people contact us and get in touch with us, they have higher expectations than customers have had initially. They're like, okay, make my business amazing. That's like what they say. And then it's up to Palantir to come in and be like, okay, this is how you're going to fix your business. Like, imagine that. He also like talked about some dynamics about, without having to go take your company private or whatever. But essentially, you have your company, you're kind of starting to fail, or your competitors doing better than you. You're like, hey, Palantir, come fix this for us. Like, imagine a scenario like that. It's just completely crazy to me.
Consider how different it was 3 years ago when we saw Karp banging on the table, but not because he was happy, but because it was, we know you need this stuff to survive. We know that in the future, you will need this stuff, ontology and Foundry, even more. And this was before AI. And now we are at the point where customers reach them. We are not interested in a use case. We want to rebuild the entire company based on AI. And stuff that I particularly appreciate is how credible Palantir is, that you can craft the financial metrics you want based on results. Look at Palantir numbers. They are perfect. So what they do actually works. And you have the top clients in each industry now that leads the way. And Karp says, okay, the customers now reach us because they look, potential customers are they reach us because they look what other companies using us do, and they realize, okay, the alternatives suck.
Yeah, I agree. I pretty much agree with everything you guys said. I thought Karp was very excited on the call, and I think the reason he was excited has nothing to do with the stock, quite frankly. It had to do with the fact that this quarter was incredible. And the stock will do whatever the stock does. I mean, again, it's at 202. A lot of us were covering this name. Below was $10. So it's hard to have a lot of sympathy for it's not at 220. It's like, okay, that's fine. If that's the extent of your analysis, then you can have that. But if you're actually holding this company for the next 10 years and you're looking at not the returns of the stock, which have been far beyond most stocks in the entire market, but actually looking at the results they put out, I mean, I would be as energetic as Karp as well if you're pulling up 114% rule of 40s, 77% U.S. commercial growth, no debt, $6.5 billion in cash, and top line revenue growth of 63%. I mean, these numbers are just incredible. It's hard to critique the numbers. It's just, the stock has a lot baked into the valuation already, so you might not get an explosive move based on just these numbers, but the numbers are incredible. And so I think the biggest thing that Karp said in that call was that there is a philosophical macro trend around the warfighter and America. The last point he made, I can't agree with even more, which is this idea of, if 60,000 Yale graduates were dying because of fentanyl, the United States would do something about it. So when you have the elite of the United States, we talk about this bifurcated economy, the elite of the United States, when they start suffering, that's when the United States starts to pay attention. But when you have average men and women that are working 9 to 5, living paycheck to paycheck, when they're suffering, no one cares. And I think if you are betting on Palantir, you're betting on a company that's building software, not to replace those people, but to actually empower those people. And I think that's a really important point that Karp wanted to get through, telling people this is who you're investing in, this is why you're investing in the company, and this is what the analysts have never fully understood as they've been trying to analyze this company. So there you go. That's what we got on earnings. Again, the stock will do whatever the stock does. At the end of the day, this was an exceptional quarter. Lots of energy from Karp, Sham, and the team on that call. And they put up the numbers that, quite frankly, justify having that type of energy. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back later tonight at 9:30. I'm doing another podcast, so I'll be live, and we'll do some more discussions on what's going on in the world of tech. I think we might have a Palantir Weekly this Friday to recap the numbers. If we don't, then we'll eventually schedule a session where we all go deeper into the numbers. I'm sure we'll put them in our Excel sheets. But that's what we got. Any last words, Arnie?
Just wow.
Amir?
Yeah, amazing. I just wanted to highlight one last quote that went under the radar a bit, and that is that they mentioned that the military has taken a decision to consolidate everything onto Vantage, which basically means that the army is like starting to align themselves and start to do everything on Palantir and will replace and kill all the legacy systems. So we have some enthusiasm about, Palantir government side, GoCarp and that gang. So that's fantastic news as well.
Was my impression, or from the comments Sham did in saying there are a lot of stuff I can't talk about, we can assume, okay, Sham is working into some very big projects. That's the impression I got.
I agree.
Yeah, I think Golden Dome is going to be a big piece that is very undervalued that I don't think people are really paying attention to, and I think that will be billions of revenue alone for Palantir. And I don't think there's anybody else out there suited that could handle something like that other than Palantir. So I'm sure, obviously, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars that has to be spent before the end of Trump's term if that goes through. And a large portion of that would go to Palantir. It's not just one company that's going to get that, right? I mean, we're talking a multitude of companies that are going to have to partner with each other to be able to make that successful. And the last piece I'll say is, hey, the stock might drop, in the short term, and it is richly valued. Even with these new numbers, you're still talking about a PE between 200 and 300x if you kind of annualize out these numbers out for the next 4 quarters, not including any real growth. But what I will say is just based off what we're seeing and the continued increase in margins in 10 years' time, we were talking about a company that will continue to be dominant and will likely be the most important enterprise company that we have. And obviously, it plays a huge part in my values, which is supporting the West and helping civil liberty. So I think, to me, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to continue to add every time I get a paycheck.
All right. I love it. Thank you, everybody. I'll be on a little later tonight. Amir, Arnie's, and Matt's Twitter and YouTube's in the description. Appreciate everybody here, and we'll be back again next time for Palantir Earnings.
Thanks for having me all.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Have a good one.